Preview show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
Doing pretty well. As we were just talking about, a little sad that we're already this far into the season, because as wonderful as we're in the swing of things, it also means that we're closer to the swing being over, but cherishing every week until we can't anymore. So,
Yes. And we are coming to you a little later than usual tonight, so we do apologize for that. But before we get started here, I do want to let you know that we are brought to you by Yoked. If you're looking for a safe and effective protein powder to add to your workout, well, then Yoked is the right product for you. At only 47 calories per packet, tastes like birthday cake. It's delicious and effective. It is a safe source of protein. Visit yoke.com today for more information. And as you just said, and so you put it so eloquently, it's hard to believe that. I mean, the college football season is already in week 9. It's crazy, goes by quick. We say it all the time, but I feel like once you get past September, October, November fly by, and the next thing you know, you're at the end of the season and it's over. So we are fast approaching the end of the season. I mean, it's crazy to me that half the Ivy League season is already over, but yet it is. All right, we're going to start, as we always do, by just taking a look back at some of the key matchups from this past weekend. And, of course, we'll start with Boston College, who lost on Thursday night to Virginia Tech in a game that they were down 28-0 early, came back and made it a game, got within a score, but ultimately ended up losing 42-21. I think for me, Ryan, and I said this the other night on the New England Football Show, the most disappointing thing about this game is they were coming off a bye. You had a bye week. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this game coming off the Virginia loss. That is a really, really disappointing, lackluster effort coming out of a bye. You fall behind 28-0 against a Virginia Tech team. Look, I know it's tough to go down to Blacksburg and win, but this is not your older brother's Virginia Tech team. This isn't your dad's Virginia Tech team. These aren't Frank Beamer's Hokies. This program is not what they were once upon a time. BC goes down there and lays an egg. This season could potentially unravel here on, and they got Louisville at home on Friday night. Our Kevin Stone's going to be there for that one, but disappointing performance by a program that a couple of weeks ago had a lot of buzz around it, a lot of excitement. At one point, they were ranked. This is disappointing.
Yeah, I think you hit it home with the bye week fact, right? And just to come out so flat. I know that they came back in the third quarter and made it somewhat interesting, but then again, it's just it almost feels emblematic a little bit of the season, right? Because even though you make a game of it, you still allow 14 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, right? 368 rushing yards allowed is just it's just kind of surprising because it did kind of feel like they were going to have some dips this season, but it didn't feel like they would kind of revert back to what BC has been. And I think you hit it on the head, like this isn't, Tyrod Taylor, Michael Vick, era Virginia Tech. This is a solid team and a tough place to play, but they should not be getting beat this bad by 3 scores. So it's tough. BC didn't run the ball very well. Castellanos just looked okay again. You look at his stat line, it's kind of a faux pas in a way. So just disappointing. And you look at the rest of the year with some tough games coming up, obviously Friday with Louisville, but you just wonder what are they building now, right? Like how resilient are they? So
it's amazing to me, the defense, which looks like early on in the year, looked like it was going to be a strength. And everybody was applauding the Tim Lewis hire. And don't get me wrong, Coach Lewis is a terrific coach. But they've really hit a wall. They're struggling on defense, giving up big plays. Like the Patriots, we were talking about them. We went live. Terrible against the run, bad run fits, not fundamentally sound. And then offensively, look, they're going to go as Castellanos goes. And he is what he is as a passer. We all know he's a dynamic athlete, dynamic runner, dual threat. But as a passer, he still leaves a little something to be desired. The decision-making could be better. But I think the bigger issue here for Boston College is they're built to run the football and stop the run, and they're not doing either right now. They're not running the football as effectively as they were at the beginning of the year, and they're not stopping the run. And I think that those two issues are glaring, and they're starting to catch up with them now. If they can't control the line of scrimmage and control the pace by running the football, they have a hard time keeping up offensively and winning games. So Disappointing nonetheless. You hope that they bounce back this week against Louisville. We'll be previewing that game momentarily. All right, let's go over to the CAA, where story of the weekend in Division I college football in New England was URI going up to Durham, New Hampshire, beating UNH 26-9. It was the Rams' first win in Durham since 1995. Huge win for Jim Fleming's squad. And that Rams hiccup that we've gotten accustomed to the last 3 years usually happens the last couple weeks. Didn't happen. That big win over Hampton has served as a springboard. They beat Brown in the Governor's Cup game. Then they get a huge monkey off their back by going up to UNH and beating the Wildcats, which is no easy feat because UNH at home has been really good through the years, and they score a lot of points. Huge win for Jim Fleming's squad. And now you look at the rest of their schedule. They got a tough one this week against a much improved Maine team, but they're in a pretty good position to stay in CAA contention and potentially get an at-large playoff berth.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about this game was at halftime, it was 3-2 UNH. And then you kind of are wondering, like, what the hell happened in that first half? And then URI completely turns around, 17 points in the third quarter. And I think this story, as much as we want to talk about UNH, is Malik Grant, 127 rushing yards, right? He's exactly as advertised and exactly what the Rams kind of needed over the last few years, was to kind of have and establish that running game, right? It's not like Devin Farrar went out there and blew the doors off of him, right? So the fact that you can kind of rely on that too when he has a down game is so important. And like you said, this is a team now, even if they drop two more. I think
they got a couple of tough games. I mean, you got Maine, you got Monmouth,
right?
And they still have to go to Delaware, so they do have some tough games left. I think I was a little too. I took their remaining schedule a little too lightly. It's right, better than I intimated.
Right, but I think a 7-4 record could potentially get them in, right? Depending on how the rest of the FCS shakes out. So if you're UNH, this is a tremendous loss. You know, they still can't run the ball, and that's so evident. It's really tough when you're so one-dimensional. 20 total, net yards on the game. Seth Morgan was just okay. I'm not sure if he got hurt or not because Matt Fezza took a lot of snaps as well. But just tough if you're UNH to think that maybe you were kind of like UNH with that outside shot at an FCS playoff berth. But now it's maybe not looking like the case. But the Rams are rolling, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah, and like I said, they got a couple of tough games coming up at home against Maine, and then Monmouth comes to town in 2 weeks. Then they got to go to Delaware.
Right.
Then you got Albany coming here, and then they go to Bryan. So their schedule is not that easy, but they're in a pretty good spot here because I still think they're good enough to win at least 3 out of those 5 games. You're 6-1. I would think, whether you win the CAA or not, if they figure out a way to win, let's say 3 of their last 5 and they finish 9-3, that should be good enough to get you an at-large playoff berth. I can't imagine the committee leaving a 9-win team at home out of the CAA. I don't see that happening. Talking about Maine, what a win for them. They shellacked Villanova. Villanova came into that game at 5-1. Best win of Jordan Stevens' tenure. They were up 35-0 in that game, Ryan. They were up 21-0 at the end of the first, 28-0 at the half. They scored early in the third to go up 35-0. An impressive win for the Black Bears. It's great to see. This program is now 4-3. But now all of a sudden, this Maine program is getting some traction again, and it's back to being a good program, one of the best programs in New England.
Yeah, I had to do a double take when I saw the box score checking on Saturday afternoon that it was not the other way around, right? That I looked too quickly. Just an unbelievable win. They get 2 interceptions. I think that, it's an overall decent game. They just dominated from start to finish, right? I mean, it's not like they did anything crazy, I think, offensively, too. I mean, Carter Peavy, 16 of 18 is exceptional, of course, anytime you can have such an awesome completion percentage. But the fact that Connor Watkins, who's one of the CAA's best quarterbacks, was kind of silenced, only 35 net rushing yards as a team for the Wildcats, right? If you're Villanova, you've got to think maybe this is an anomaly. But now, if I'm the rest of the CAA, I'm thinking, well, hold on, like what was the formula Maine used, right? So that's why I think it's not exactly open season, but maybe in some ways it is, right? Maine is 2-2 in the CAA, so you're looking at the rest of the season like, I don't know, maybe we could do something here.
Yeah, and URI right now is currently at the top. They're 3-0 in the CAA. Richmond is also 3-0. Richmond, of course, beat Delaware this past weekend. Huge win for the Spiders, who are leaving the CAA after the season to join the Patriot League, which is still a head scratcher to me. I don't get that.
Yeah.
Delaware is 3-1 in the CAA, but they can't win the conference title because they're moving up to FBS next year. So URI is in a pretty good spot. Maine is 2-2, but they certainly are well positioned to potentially stay in the hunt at least till the end of the season. It's going to make for an interesting matchup to finish the season for the Bryce Cowell Musket with UNH. Though I think both teams are going to be pretty good, and that could potentially be a really fun matchup in that rivalry game. And Brian, of course, losing to Monmouth 55-17. Kind of hard to believe, right? Because 2 weeks ago, they're going to Brown and they beat Brown 42-35. Since then, they've lost 2 in a row. Ended up having a tough loss to Albany 2 weeks ago. But this is a really disappointing performance for this program. To go on the road, and Monmouth is good. Former Maine quarterback Derek Robertson having a big year there for the Hawks. But this is a disappointing performance for this Bryant squad. I mean, they haven't built off that Brown win.
Yeah, I know that Monmouth is a solid team. Derek Robertson has been pretty awesome this year. He's been quite the game changer, I think, for them. But just a really tough day from Jared Guess. Fabrice McKendy can't really run the ball. 103 total yards rushing and 328 for the Hawks as well, I think is what's kind of so striking just for how much they kind of just had their way, right? They had like almost 6 or 7 guys with at least a carry. So it's too bad because you think that, again, like you said, you build that momentum, then you kind of drop it. But these are the expected kind of growing pains of their first year in the CAA, you would think. But it's tough when you show something, but then to come and fall so flat like this not too long after.
Yeah. No, it is. It's disappointing for sure. All right. We're going to go over to the Ivy League. And Brown kicked off things last Friday night with a 29-17 loss to Princeton. That is now 3 straight losses for the Bears. Really disappointed coming off that Harvard game. One of the things that we talked about after that Harvard game was you can't let this win linger, because if it lingers, it seeps into the players' heads and they begin to think, well, we just beat Harvard. I mean, how does it get any better than that? And it does. And I think that after that win, we were all ready to say, okay, this Brown program, it's early, but this Brown program could potentially contend in the Ivy League. Hasn't been the case. They've lost 3 in a row. Tough loss on Friday night. Princeton has not been very good this year, but Brown goes down there. The offense struggles. They don't really do anything in the passing game or the running game. Just a disappointing overall performance by a program that we thought was ready to take the next step, especially after going 5-5 last year.
Yeah, and it's not like the defense isn't doing their utmost, right? They had 2 interceptions, right? But it's Jake Wilcox, he's throwing the ball. It feels like every week when you look at his stat line, he's throwing the ball like 40, 45, 50 times a game, and it's just not sustainable. If you want to be consistently good, right? He's also the leading rusher this week. It's just, again, we come back to it over and over, right? The run game for Brown is just not consistent enough to kind of be in that upper echelon of the Ivy League. So it's definitely disappointing, especially after that Harvard game where you're thinking, hey, we're in the top 4 of the Ivy to start the season, and then they've just really kind of fallen off.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And look, we know a James Perry coach team is going to score points. They can score points. That hasn't necessarily been the case the last couple weeks. And then, of course, the defense, which is much improved. Tim Weaver's done a great job there, their defensive coordinator. But, again, just a disappointing performance. They host Cornell on Saturday. Harvard wins a shootout over Holy Cross in their annual rivalry matchup, 35-34. What can you say about that Harvard offense? Jaden Craig, Cooper Barcade, the 2 backs. I mean, that is a really good offense. They've gotten into a groove here offensively, Ryan. And for Holy Cross, again, you're Holy Cross. I mean, you've had one of the more dominant FCS runs the last 4 years. You're at a place now where it's first year for Dan Curran. There's no moral wins. We talk about that all the time. But if you're Dan Curran and this coaching staff, you have to be very happy with the performance of your football team after that game. I mean, to go toe-to-toe with Harvard and lose it at the wire, I think it says a lot of where Holy Cross is and how much better they've gotten in recent weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that when you look at that record of 3-5, you're like, oh man, like Is it a tough first year for Dan Curran? And then you look at 4 of those 5 losses and, 6 points, 3 points, 1 point, 1 point, all to the region's best, right? So it's just, again, you're knocking on the door. You're just not finishing and do what you have to do. So it's kind of interesting to see that. You got to just wonder what is the secret sauce that they could do. But it was a great game nonetheless. I mean, Holy Cross battling back to kind of make it a game. Obviously, the crazy play at the end. So, I thought Joe Pazanski was a little bit better after having a couple tough weeks. Jaden Clairvaux looked pretty good, which is, huge with Jordan Fuller out. So, again, it's a feather in the cap for them. And, of course, for Harvard, it's kind of a win that shows, I think, the rest of your conference, too, that, we can take on the best of anywhere, not just from our conference.
Yeah, and Yale beats Lehigh 38-23, so the Bulldogs bounce back after a heartbreaking loss to Dartmouth. Dartmouth beats Central Connecticut State, who plays everybody tough, except Central Michigan. But Blue Devils go up to Hanover and hang and go toe-to-toe with Dartmouth. They lose 20-16. Big Green is 5-0. Big one coming up against Harvard in a couple weeks there. But nonetheless, it should be another good weekend of Ivy League football. Dartmouth right now is in the driver's seat. Like I said, at 5-0, but Harvard is nipping at their heels at 4-1, and you can never count out Yale. They always seem to hit their stride this time of year. UConn losing 23-20 to Wake Forest. I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid, and I'm not sure if I'm injecting it into my veins right now. Maybe I'm going to lay off of that, but I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid. I still think that their schedule is set up to where they win these next 2 against Rice on Saturday and Georgia State the following week. They'll be 6-3 and bowl eligible. Brett McMurphy, college football analyst, has had them in the bowl picture the last few weeks. He's changed it. He had them in a bowl today against Arkansas State. So obviously McMurphy thinks that they're a bowl team. But this is a disappointing loss. There was some controversial officiating in the game. But this is a disappointing loss because if you're UConn, they kind of needed a signature win this year. Wake is down. They're not as good as they usually are. This was that opportunity, and I thought it was a missed opportunity.
I think what was so striking was how really the inability to run the ball, for the Huskies, considering how strong that they were coming in with Cam Edwards, Terrell Robinson, Victor Rosa, and the 45 net yards in the game. And they didn't do anything particularly well. Nick Evers had a couple big throws, but it's also not like Wake Forest did anything particularly well. I think that's what was so striking watching the game was it wasn't like either team was that great. I think Wake Forest ultimately was the better team over the course.
Of course, you were there. You covered the game, so
right.
You saw it firsthand.
Right, and of course the end of the game was a tough call. I do think there was some jersey grabbing going on. There could have been a PI, which would have extended the drive to give UConn a chance to come back and kick the game tying field goal. I just want to shout out, honestly, Nick Evers, who I thought handled that super well after the game in the post-game press conference, because obviously, Jim Moore came in there. He was pissed. He was about 45 seconds, dropped a couple swears and left. And then I thought Nick Evers was just awesome. He was peppered with questions, what did you see? What is this? But he took full ownership, saying we shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. So I thought that if I'm a Husky fan, that sucked on Saturday. But, that's good for me to see if I'm a fan thinking, okay, this guy – he's a real deal here, off the field too. So,
yeah, and they got a big one this week against Rice in a game that they need to win, and we'll be previewing that shortly. All right, just continuing our tour around New England here before we wrap it up and preview this weekend's matchups. Last weekend, you had Sacred Heart losing to Lafayette 31-17. Tough loss for the Pios. They come back home this week to take on Mercyhurst. Again, the inconsistency continues. Defense plays great one week. The next week they don't. The offense is continuing to struggle. It's just been kind of a tale of 2 seasons for Sacred Heart. Merrimack beats Stonehill 48-28 in a game hour Paul Vazella covered. Merrimack has played a really tough schedule, a really good schedule. They got Colgate at home this week, but big win for them over Stonehill. It was nice to see the Warriors get the offense going. Former Stonehill running back Jermaine Corbin had a nice game against his former team. For Stonehill, Asher Karaha is out. That's affecting them. Again, that they're struggling at receiver. Inability to make big plays has been a problem. Their running game has been pretty good, but they're struggling at receiver, struggling on defense, and that has kind of been the story this year for the Skyhawks, which is hard to believe because they've been very competitive the last couple of years as a D1 program, but you can clearly tell a lot of the new faces have had a hard time blending in, and it's showing up on the score sheet.
Yeah, this is the team that I feel like a lot of people thought Stonehill would be last year, right? Especially during that early transition. But it's almost like kind of flip-flopping away. But an impressive win, I think, nonetheless, from Merrimack, 48 points, right? They only threw the ball 15 total times. But, that's just got to suck if you're Stonehill and you lose, Corbett up, not too far away from you, in the same state, what would have been the same conference, obviously not anymore, and then to get gashed like that. I mean, and then Brendan Wyatt, too, 101 rushing yards. Yeah, two guys go for 100 yards. So an impressive win nonetheless, no matter how many points Stonehill scored, which I think is still, against a good Merrimack team, 28 points for Stonehill to score is nothing to scoff at either. I think that's definitely, if there's something we could take away from Stonehill, it's that this week.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think if you're Stonehill, I think what it comes down to is it's really about what you do the rest of the way and how do you get these young guys that much needed experience to help you going into next year. It's not going to be easy, though, because you got Duquesne coming into town this week. So that's going to be a tough matchup for the Skyhawks. You are watching the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by our lead college football writer, Ryan Barry. We want to remind you that if you are looking for a safe and effective protein product, well, then Yolked is that product for you with only 47 calories per packet. It is a safe and effective protein powder, and it is delicious. Tastes like birthday cake. Ryan was telling me before we went live that he plans on ordering some and trying it. I've used it as well. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great deal as well. Visit yolk.com today for more information. All right, so let's preview some games here. We got a bunch of big games coming up this weekend, and of course, we are going to start with Boston College hosting Louisville on Friday night. The incomparable Kevin Stone is going to be there for that one. Should be a pretty good game. Louisville is favored by 7.5 in this one, Ryan. I don't know what to make of this Boston College football team. With the injuries, they've got some big injuries on defense. Cornerback Amari Jackson is out for the year. Cam Arnold got hurt last week. They're thin at linebacker. Team is in a tough spot here. It's hard to pick them in a game like this against a Louisville team coached by Jeff Brom that's explosive and can make big plays.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Cardinals, but just because of basically everything you just said. But I just like the way that Louisville's played this year. Their losses have been close, 7 points to SMU, 7 points to Notre Dame, 7 points to Miami. So they're in games, right? But their defense, I think, does struggle. So I think that maybe this could be a week that BC could take advantage. It could be a look-ahead game for Louisville, right? They've got Clemson on the horizon, at Clemson, that is, the week after. So maybe BC could take advantage of that and keep it close, but I'm definitely going to go with the Cardinals here. But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Louisville to win, but if I were putting money on this one, I would take Boston College with the points. I think BC plays tough. I think it's a competitive game. I could see Louisville winning between 3 and 6 points, but ultimately, yeah, I think the injuries on defense are a major problem. Yeah, you still have Donovan Ezaraku, Neto, Paula at end. That defensive front is still pretty good for Boston College. And they're fortunate in that they have some depth at cornerback and in the secondary, but Amari Jackson's a hell of a football player. You're not replacing that kind of production. I don't think they do it here. I like Louisville in this one as well. I think the problem is ultimately, till this BC defense shows us that they can get back to consistently stopping people and getting those extra possessions for the offense and getting more consistent pressure on the opposing quarterback and doing a better job of fitting in against the run and getting off blocks. Until we see all those things from this defense, it's really, when you look at the rest of their schedule, it's going to be hard to pick them in a lot of those games. All right, next up, we have UConn hosting Rice. The Huskies are favored in this one by 6.5, coming off a tough 23-28 loss to Wake Forest, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Look, Rice is coming into this game at 2-5, but they're tough. They're well coached. They're a smart football team. They're not the most talented team. On paper, you look at this and you say, okay, UConn's the better team. They should win. But these are games that have been tough the last couple of years for UConn. We saw this a couple of weeks ago against Temple. So while, yes, I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid, I'm not injecting it in my veins anymore. I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid. This is a tricky spot here, Ryan. That number is a little rich for me. I don't know if I like UConn at 6.5.
Yeah, I think the only thing that makes me somewhat optimistic taking it is just that this team seems like they can respond, right? And if they don't, though, that's going to say a lot, right? Because I do think a lot of people have been pumping their tires and, injecting Kool-Aid as we have, right? But, that Temple game was a lot closer than I think it should have been. And I think that there was maybe a little bit of looking ahead to the bye week before that, right? And then last week, maybe there's a little confidence coming in off the bye week, right? So can they mentally respond to this? I think they can. So I'm going to take the Huskies and the points just because there seemed to be some anger after last week, and I feel like the Owls are about to potentially feel the wrath of that, unfortunately.
Yes. Second time in 3 weeks that they're taking on Owls.
That's right.
2 weeks ago was the Temple Owls. Now it's the Rice Owls.
So and didn't they play FAU this year too? Aren't they the Owls?
They did. Well? They did. They are the Owls. Good call.
That's right. Yeah.
3 teams nicknamed the Owls this year.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
I think they're going 3 for 3. Yeah.
I think they are going 3 for 3 against the Owls. Yep. Who's going 3 for 3? UConn? Yeah. All right. That was stupid. All right. Speaking of stupid, next up we have UMass hosting Wagner. Some people will say it's stupid that they're playing an NEC team, and that's why I said that. Coming off the bye, the Minutemen should be refreshed. They should be ready to go. You'll be covering that one, of course. It's a game they should win, right? And I got to be careful what I say here because my guy, Derek Getchell, former player of mine, he's the D coordinator at Wagner. When I picked Stonehill against Wagner a few weeks back, Wagner came into Easton, beat Stonehill, and Getch had no problem reaching out to me and rubbing it in my face. Is he going to rub it in my face again if I pick UMass in this one? As of right now, there's no line on this one. But obviously you'd have to think UMass is favored. And let's just make up a number here. Say they're favored by, 7.5. I think that's probably a little low, but let's say they're favored by 7.5. But again, I don't. They should win, right? They should pick up win number 2. But with this team, they're a mess right now. There's so many new faces. A lot of guys that they were counting on have not stepped up. Walk me through this one. They should win, but how does it play out?
I finished my preview actually just before we met up today, and I think that always tells me a little bit of a story. And I'm very big into the overall team stats. I know that not everyone reads into those as well, but they really struggle against the run, and it's tough because UMass does not have a great run offense. But I do think that maybe this could be the week to kind of get things going a little bit. I do think that Wagner's quarterback is decent enough. Joe Cady, he's a Vermont native, formerly played for Assumption, which is really cool. I'm sure he'll have a lot of fans there. But I do think UMass wins this. I don't think it's going to be as close as Central Connecticut State. But if it does go that close, I'll be very frustrated. But I had it actually being somewhere around 38-16, which might be too generous. It might be too crazy sounding. But I think even about that Central Connecticut game, and UMass was cruising to start, and then they got lazy. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen this week coming off the bye. So UMass, I think, is going to win. A loss would
we're not. That's not entering our minds. We're going to stay positive.
But it's
Minutemen bounce back, pick up win number 2.
Right. So that's what I think happens. So
yeah, I agree. They should win this game. They're going to be the more talented team. Wagner, pretty well coached. I think that they could make this a game for about a half. They could hang around. I think ultimately UMass pulls away and wins. If in fact that line was 7.5, I would be comfortable taking the Minutemen at that number. I think they win by a couple scores and pick up their second win of the season and try to get back on track. And now they've got some tough games coming up. You got Mississippi State. Obviously, you got Liberty. You got Georgia. You got UConn. Might be their last shot at a win. So
yeah, it is. Bona fide is, yeah.
Right. So, all right. Next up, we are going to go to the CAA. We've got some key matchups this week. We're going to first start with Rhode Island hosting Maine. Black Bears, pleasant surprise so far at 4-3. Of course, URI in first place in the CAA at 6-1. We don't have the DraftKings lines yet, but if there were lines on this game, URI would be favored by 6.5. Of course, I covered this game 2 years ago down in Kingston. Maine came down and played him pretty tough in Jordan Stevens' first year. I think that this should be a really good game between two teams that I think are very similar in their approach. They want to run the football, make some big plays in the passing game, lean on their defense. 6.5 is a big number, though. So with that said, I'm leaning taking Maine here as a dog to cover. I think URI wins, but I could see this being a 3-point game. I could see Maine playing them tight.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to take Rhode Island, just because, like, I like them coming off the win that they just had compared to Maine, which sounds crazy. I just think it was such a crazy game, going on the road right away against a, regional foe, I think might be almost like a trap in a way. So I'm going to take the Rams.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Rams too, but I think that Maine plays them tough. If I were putting money on this, I would take Maine as a dog at that number at the 6.5. All right, next up, we have UNH visiting Villanova. Tough game here, tough spot for the Wildcats. Nova is mythically favored in this one by 6.5. Looking to bounce back after a tough loss at Maine against the Black Bears. UNH looking to rebound after losing to URI at home for the first time in almost 30 years. Should be a pretty good game here, but does UNH bounce back? That's the question inquiring minds want to know.
I think it's a tough matchup to come into after such a bad loss last week. And I think what also sucks is that they're getting Villanova off of such a bad loss themselves at home, wanted to right the ship. Because, in a lot of ways, Villanova's playing for one of those top seeds in the FCS playoffs, and they can't afford to slip up like this. So I'm going to take Villanova and the points. Really discouraging loss from the Wildcats of New Hampshire last week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Nova here as well. I think they cover that number. Problem with UNH is they can't run the football. That was a signature part of their offense the last couple of years with Dylan Lobby. Not the case anymore. They've had a hard time running the football. Teams are now basically saying, okay, if we take away Seth Morgan, Logan Tomlinson, Caleb Burke, and that skill group in the passing game, we'll take our chances by playing lighter boxes against that running game and see what happens. It's proven to be an effective strategy. And I think for UNH to get this thing back on track, they've got to figure out a way to run the football. All right, our other matchup is Richmond coming into town. They're currently in second place in the CAA at 5-2. They visit Smithfield to take on Bryant. Of course, the Bulldogs are coming off a tough loss to Monmouth. Richmond is favored in this one by 10.5.
Yeah, I'll take Richmond. I don't know about the points. Part of me thinks that Bryant's going to bounce back a little bit and play tough in the first half, but I do think that the Spiders will hold on inevitably, just cover and win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Spiders here as well. I think, look, last week, I think, unfortunately for Bryant, was a preview of what's to come in many ways in that Monmouth game. I think they're going to struggle to slow down this Richmond offense. I could see the Bulldogs offense getting theirs and staying competitive and win and losing in a shootout. But until that Bryant defense proves that they can consistently stop people, I think that's going to be the difference. Look, in that Brown game, I covered that game a couple of weeks ago. They came up big with some key stops down the stretch. I know they're well coached. I've known defensive coordinator Anthony Barisi for a long time. I know he's a good coach. I know they're well coached. I think that there's been a lot of turnover with the roster in general, and I think that there's some guys in that program that are still trying to get caught up and get acclimated. I think it's unfortunately you're running out of time to get them fully caught up, but I do think that has been part of their problem. This is a program that has a lot of pride. I do think that they'll be competitive in this game, but ultimately I think Richmond wins. All right, next up, we're going to go to the Ivy League, and we have Yale at Penn. Penn is favored in this one by 3.5.
This is a tough one. I think that Yale has been kind of up and down. They've shown some things. Obviously, last week was a big win against Lehigh, but Penn is a very solid team. So I don't want to be a contrarian and pick outside of New England, but there's part of me that's kind of leaning Penn here just because I don't know how I feel about Yale at the moment. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll take Penn, but this is kind of a toss-up for me. This is a classic Ivy League where Yale could easily win, but I could also won't be surprised if I see Penn win too.
Well, a lot of people are down on them, but don't write off Penn just yet. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I had to make
It's okay. Yeah.
Don't write off Penn just yet. Look, I like Yale in this one. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs. They've been inconsistent, right? It's been one on, one off. But look, they very easily could be 4-1 right now. And the conversation's completely different with this football team, especially with how young they are. The conversation could be completely different if they're 4-1 and they're in the mix and they're going down to Pennsylvania to take on a tough Quakers team in their place. I like Yale here. I think Yale is starting to come around offensively. They're starting to realize that offensive staff, you got to run the offense through Joshua Pitzenberger in that running game. He gets going. He's one of the best backs in the Ivy League. I think that this will be a shootout, but I like Penn here in a 35-31 kind of game. Tony Reno wants to win games by running the football, playing great defense. Not sure he has that kind of team this year, but he does have a team that can put up some points. I think they'll put up points and take care of business on Saturday. All right, next up we have Cornell visiting Brown. Cornell is favored in this one by 3.5.
Another one that I kind of – the Ivy's tough this year. I mean, it's when isn't it tough? I'm sure you could have got me any year saying that, right? But I think Jamison Wang's a better quarterback. I do think that Brown is going to right the ship. I feel like an idiot because I feel like I said this last week when they took on Princeton, but this game is at home. Cornell is also struggling, so I'm going to take Brown, even though, again, I think this is a coin flip similar to the last game where, I'm kind of just defaulting to who's hosting this week, right? And that's who's hosting. So I'm going to go with Brown.
Cornell's a hard team to figure out.
Yeah.
They always tend to play the upper echelon programs in the Ivy League tough. I haven't seen anything from Brown the last 3 weeks to lead me to believe that as well as they play at home at times, I haven't seen anything from them the last 3 weeks that leads me to believe that they can win this game. If you had asked me after that Harvard game, I would have said, yeah, check that one off. They should win that one when they come back home in 2 weeks. But nope. I mean, again, it doesn't for me. That Bryant loss really is the one that I think set them back because they haven't recovered from it. They've lost 3 in a row. You mentioned Jamison Wang. He's arguably the most underrated player in the Ivy League. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go Cornell here as well. Dartmouth at Columbia. Columbia's been sneaky good under first-year coach John Poppy. They're 4-1. Dartmouth has been winning a lot of close games. That's kind of been Sammy McCorkle's team's recipe for success. This Columbia team can score points. Dartmouth is going to need to run the football, ball control them a little bit, lean on their defense if they want to win another close one. It's not going to be easy. Dartmouth is favored in this one by 3.5. I'm going to take the big green here. I think they go on the road and get it done. But like I said, this Columbia team is pretty good and they're well coached.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take Columbia. I feel like we're going against each other for every Ivy League. This is what we need, though, anyway. We need disc. We need some 98.5, the sports sub,
yes,
discourse just because.
A civil disagreement.
Yeah, but I guess I'm going against my better judgment for everything here. I feel bad because I'm picking against most of the New England teams, but it's harder for me to see. Well, you know what? Damn, John, I have no idea because it's hard for me to see Dartmouth being 6-0, but it's also tough for me to see Columbia being 5-1. But I think the point you made that scares me about Dartmouth is how many close games that they've won.
They know how to win close games.
Right.
Yep.
So that does make me feel nervous for Columbia. But there also are in a lot of close games by their own admission, right? So, I'm going to take the Lions here just because I'm wondering, they've looked good the last few weeks. So,
all right. Finally, we have Harvard hosting Princeton on Saturday. Our Kevin Stone is going to be there for that one. Tigers coming in 2-3, Crimson 4-1. This is usually a marquee matchup on the Ivy League slate. Princeton, they're not as good as they usually are, but nonetheless, they're Princeton. It's still a very good program. Harvard is favored in this one by 6.5. I'm going to take the Crimson. I think, well, here's the thing. Hold on. Part of me wants to I think the Crimson win. But if I'm betting this game, I like Princeton as a dog because Harvard has been in a lot of close games this year, as we saw last week. We saw against UNH. So I'm going to pick Harvard to win, but I'm going to put the money on Princeton to cover. I could see Harvard winning by 3 to 6 points.
Yeah, and this has sometimes historically been their trap game. I think it was last year. No, not last. Maybe 2 years ago. Where Harvard was cruising along, they took on Princeton at home on a rainy day and lost. Right, so I'm going to take Harvard as well, but I think it'll be close as well.
Yeah, I agree. All right, next up, we're going to go to the FCS Independents. We got Sacred Heart at 3-5 hosting Mercyhurst, who is 2-6. Pios are favored in this one by 3.5. I'm going to take the Pioneers in this one. The roller coaster ride continues with Sacred Heart. 1 week we're on, 1 week we're off. This week I think we're on. I'm on the roller coaster. I'm in. I'm taking the Pios in a low-scoring game. I could see this being a 17-10, 20-10 kind of game, Sacred Heart.
Yeah, agreed. I think, they're catching Mercyhurst at the right time in their schedule of, where they really need a win for Sacred Heart, that is, coming off a tough loss last week to Lafayette. It wasn't a complete blowout like maybe I was expecting it to be, with Lafayette being one of the better teams in the Patriot League. So, definitely going with the Pios.
Yeah. And Merrimack is back home at Duane Stadium hosting Colgate. Colgate comes into town with a 2-5 record. Warriors coming into town with a 3-4 record. Should be a competitive game, but what we've seen with this Merrimack team is they're starting to figure it out on offense. They're starting to move the ball. They're starting to be more consistent. Defense has played well in spots, but they need to be more consistent. Merrimack is favored in this one by 6.5, and I'm going to take them with that number. I think they win by 7 to 10 points and get to 500 at 4-4.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to go with the Warriors. I like what they're building. I like where they've been so far this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, next up, when we go over to the NEC, we got Central Connecticut State visiting Long Island. Long Island is 1-7 on the season. CCSU is 3-4. CCSU is favored in this one by 3.5.
This would be a really disappointing loss for Central Connecticut. So I'm picking them. I like that line. I like what they've done so far this year, but it would be very disappointing considering how close they've been to then go and lose a game that I think should be a win.
CCSU still has a shot to win the NEC. They're currently third. They're 2-0 in conference play. They are trailing Duquesne, who's 2-0, and Robert Morris, who's 3-0 at the top. Robert Morris has been a surprise this year at 4-3. They can still win the NEC. So this is a big game for them. If they can win the NEC and somehow run the table here and end up in the playoffs, that would be huge for the Blue Devils. This is a game that they should win, but this is also a Long Island team that, if you remember, Ryan, played tough with URI. They hung in there losing 28-21. So
they did, yeah.
This is a talented Long Island team. They're certainly not a pushover. All right, next up we have Stonehill hosting Duquesne. The Dukes come into town favored by 8.5.
I think Duquesne covers that. I think it's going to be a tough day for the Skyhawks. This is a good team in Duquesne. They're trying to win the conference title, so yeah, I like the Dukes.
Yeah, excuse me. Me too. I like the Dukes as well. I think Stonehill, again, like I said earlier, young at wide receiver, young on defense. It's a recipe for struggling, and they have struggled this year. It's going to be a long year for Eli Gardner's squad. You hope that it's a building block year moving forward, but Duquesne's a better team here, and I think that they come into Easton and get the job done. And finally, we have Holy Cross hitting the road this week to take on Lafayette, who is 4-3. When you look at the Patriot League standings, Holy Cross still has a shot. They're currently at the top of the Patriot League standings at 2-0, but they have a stiff challenge this week against a good Lafayette team who enters the weekend 1-1 in Patriot League play. Yeah,
I'm going to take the Crusaders. I just, their body of work in non-con has just been so good, and another close loss. I think they're going to be pretty pissed from last week. It almost kind of feels like they're taking out all of their non-conference frustration on the Patriot League. So give me the Crusaders, although this is going to be a very tough one. That they're going to really have to come out swinging to win this one against a good Lafayette team, who's probably the other favorite in the league, if we're being honest, outside of Holy Cross.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think this is going to be a tough game for them going on the road down there taking on a Lafayette team that's been pretty good this year. I think I like Holy Cross as well. And I think you bring up a great point about their non-conference schedule. It certainly helps them now that they're in conference play. Clearly, they're battle-tested, and I think that proves to be the difference. And look, if you're Holy Cross, you're past that part of your schedule now. It's all conference games from here or league games from here. They have an opportunity to make some hay here and get on a little bit of a run and salvage this season. So we shall see. But give me Holy Cross here as well. I think Joe Pazanski, Jaden Clairvaux, the offense plays well. Defense does their part. It's a tight game, 3 to 7 point type of game, but I'm going with the Crusaders as well. All right, Ryan, final thoughts here before we wrap it up.
It's gonna be another beautiful weekend, and just hope that people get out, because this is we're running out of time here.
Yeah, great weekend for college football. You want to, and I say it all the time. You know, if you have a child playing high school football, get out there and watch them. If you're a Patriots fan, get out there and watch them. But I'm telling you, even if you have no connection to the college football in the area, get out and watch it. Get out to some of these games; they're fantastic. Whether it be Division I, II, or III college football, the games are great. We cover Division I right now. Our hope is in the future to be able to expand our college coverage in the area. But certainly get out there and enjoy the weekend. It's going to be beautiful. And look, next week's the last week in October. I mean, it's supposed to warm up again middle of next week, but we're not going to have too many more of these days. You know what I mean? Once you get into November, daylight savings, it gets darker earlier, it gets colder. You've already seen how cold it is in the morning. So get out there and enjoy the college football, because like Ryan said, we're running out of time here. We only have about 4 weeks left in the season. So get out there and enjoy. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Serenitas. We will be back with you next week. Until then, get out there and enjoy the games. And as